my name is Michelle Mott, and we are so glad you guys chose to come and participate in this month's webinar. This month, the topic is the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And to keep me cohesive, Dana, my assistant, is standing by for any of my technical difficulties as well as any of yours. So if you have any troubles, jot down her phone number. It's our office number, 515-221-2688. We had a fantastic response for this topic. 50 organizations, of which over half were new to this webinar series. So we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the platform. We're using Zoom, which, speaking of which, you can zoom in and zoom out depending on how large you want your screen to be. If you're watching it by yourself, or if you're in a conference room showing it to a group, feel free to make it as comfortable for your own viewing pleasure. There's also a feature that we'd like to take advantage of. Click the chat box at the bottom of the screen to bring up the chat box to the right. This will allow us to have any conversations. Oftentimes, what you can do is send a message to myself. I'd like everyone to be able to either see a response or read a question. You choose all panelists, attendee, you type in your response, and then you basically hit enter, and like I just did, you can send off a message. Another feature is the audio settings. So if you don't have a computer audio to call in, you can use the phone number that was listed in the email. So why do we have these monthly webinars? Well, we've been asked, and many of you have said it's really been a nice shot in the arm throughout the year to give you some monthly motivation, especially hard this time of year when the wind chill factor is definitely a factor in our overall motivation. And then also to just expose you to one of our inspiring programs and or products. This particular month, we are going to focus in on giving you a preview of the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, of which this program helps teams to trust one another, engage in conflict around ideas, commit to decisions, hold one another accountable, and focus on achieving collective results. You were given a couple of pieces attached to your instruction email that we'll be referring to. One is the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team overview handout. And there's also a single page that has our upcoming webinar schedule. Afterwards, if you would be so kind to give us some feedback, we welcome what you think could improve not only your learning experience, but offer any additional topic areas. We will give you our webinar discount offer to take and use this resource in your own workplace. So let's go ahead and get started. As you may know, some of you that have been following our webinar series for the past probably 5 years, this year with the new year, we came out with a new format. Feedback had said an hour is a little bit too long to commit to, so we've now cut it back to 30 minutes in length, done 3 times at the top of the hour, 9, 10, and 11 o'clock Central Time. So let's begin with a look at our teams. There are a variety of different types of teams that you may have served on or enjoyed. You may enjoy watching athletic teams. You could have served on an athletic team yourself, whether it be in college or in school. You may be involved with obviously a variety of different work teams. At work, there could be department project teams. A leadership is a team. And then there's also the family as a team. So as we talk about the dynamics of a team, feel free to think about the different applications of teams that you might be a part of. So the first exercise I always like to get people thinking about is, what has been your past experience, positive or negative, in teams? And then on the worksheet, and again, what I'm going to encourage you to do is, if you are watching with a group of folks, feel free to stay a little bit after the webinar is finished and go through some of these exercises, because these are sampling of some of the exercises that we'll do in the 5 behaviors. What I do want you to do is think about considering answering some questions that a survey was conducted. Out of 100, what % do you think said yes to these 5 questions? First, When coworkers admit their mistakes, does it make you more likely to trust them? Survey says 84%. So what that means is that we build trust when we are vulnerable, or at least acknowledging that we may have been wrong. Second question, do you think your workplace would be more effective if people were more frank or honest with their opinions? Survey says 71%, which means people value others' insights, even if they are different from your own. The third survey question asked, do you sometimes feel that team projects suffer because people aren't committed enough? Survey said 86% of those surveyed thought that oftentimes projects could have been more effective or efficient if people or team members were more committed. The fourth question on the survey asked, would your team be more effective if people were better at holding one another accountable? Survey said 89% said yes, which means not only holding oneself accountable, but being willing to step up to the plate and hold each other accountable. And then the last question, in your work experience, have you seen projects suffer because people put their own needs in front of the team needs? And the survey said 87% said yes. What that means is that oftentimes people will lose sight of the common goal for the team and work on what matters most to their employees or themselves. Your team or teams, however many you're on, can do better. Patrick Lencioni wrote the New York Times best-selling book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And together in partner with Wiley, they have created a wonderful process to take teams through to improve their effectiveness. Using the model that Patrick wrote about called the trust model. You can see that it is in the shape of a pyramid, and for the same reason he was intentional, indicating that in order to have a solid, effective team, it has to have a solid base or foundation built around trust. And what that means is if you have trust, you'll have better conflict around ideas. With conflict comes productivity, and with that, you'll have more or greater commitment. With that comes accountability, everyone feeling as though they're doing their fair share, and ultimately able to create or produce meaningful results. As we roll out this program, we oftentimes look at breaking them into 7 different modules. And the very last page in this handout talks about the 7 different modules, of which the middle 5 are done during a 2-day team development retreat. And then the first and the last module are done as webinars. So let's take a peek. After the webinar, the team is assembled and asked to create a purpose statement. The purpose statement is different than the mission statement of the organization, but it should support it, giving more clarity as to why this particular team exists. So if it's a leadership team, maybe their primary purpose is to provide overall leadership and guidance to the organization. Or maybe it's a middle level leadership team or supervisory team, and they need to take a look at how do they carry out the strategies of the organization to their specific department. Maybe it's a department team. So obviously if it's a specific financial team, so maybe it is to manage and monitor our financial resources. Then each of the members of the team are to complete an online assessment, and from the responses, a team report is given at the team development retreat, where each member has their own results as well as a composite of what the team has said collectively. What we like about this particular tool, and so many times when you're dealing with intangible behavior, you can't measure it. Well, this actually uses the 5 behaviors on a 5-point scale and measures the team's effectiveness in 3 different levels. This is an example of a team where 4 out of the 5 behaviors were in the lowest of categories, receiving scores between 1 to 3.24. Only 1 results was in a medium level, and there were unfortunately no areas in the high performing. So this team, as you can tell, had a lot of opportunities for improvement. So let's take a peek at the first behavior, building trust. Without trust, in fact, if you wanted to follow along, I'm in probably about the 5th page in the workbook. Without trust, teams tend to conceal their weaknesses and mistakes. They fail to ask for help, nor do they offer to help others. They jump to conclusions, and they tend to hold on to grudges. However, if a team has trust, its members admit their weaknesses and mistakes, willing to ask and offer others help. They accept feedback as a sign to improve their effectiveness. They give other people the benefit of the doubt, thinking that their intentions are good, and are willing to not only offer, but accept the apologies of others. Now, Patrick Lencioni believes that it's not just about any kind of trust. It needs to be vulnerable-based trust. Confidence among team members that peers' intentions are good and there's no reason to be protective or careful around them. In essence, what that means, members must be comfortable being vulnerable with one another. So how do you learn to be vulnerable? Well, first of all, a definition or two of the adjective vulnerable means that you are susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm, which oftentimes prevents us from being vulnerable. You're in need of special care, support, or protection because of a situation, age, disability, or risk, or neglect. And sometimes when people ask for help, that is indicating that you do need some special care or attention. And then there are some synonyms listed there: helpless, defensiveless, powerless, weak, and susceptible. So we're thinking, why is this conversation in a team building where you're trying to promote the strength of a team? Well, that's because you need to be able to express your vulnerability to build trust. For instance, think about when someone had said to you, "I'm sorry," or "I made a mistake," "I don't know," "I need your help," or "I'm sad," or "I'm disappointed." Do you think less of them? No, actually, you really think more of them. So it actually is a team building behavior. Why would it be difficult for people to express their vulnerability? Like I mentioned, a lot of times it's because they have to admit their own shortcomings, which is difficult for themselves and their pride, let alone being publicly exposed. And the third is, what would you think a team could gain if members were willing to be vulnerable? And again, these are questions that, if again, you'd like to get an example of some of these discussions, do so with your team. On the next page, we've given you another extremely powerful exercise we take teams through. They're asked to share a little bit about their childhood, where they grew up, how many siblings they had, where they fell in the pecking order, if they were the oldest, the youngest, the only child, and then what important or unique challenge they faced in their childhood. And a lot of times what they learn is based on their experience as one of many in a large family or one of few in a team, can really make an impact on how people set their priorities for a given day. Once they do that, then they have a much more awareness and trust for each other. Now, this is a fun, quick little exercise we're going to try today. And I'm going to give you my answer, but I'd like you to think about and add up the value next to these 20 different activities that you have been a part of throughout your lifetime. And I'm willing to share with you, mine was 190, and I believe Dana typed that she was 160 in the first hour. So I'd like for you to go through, add up the value, and if you dare, I'd encourage you to jot down what your total was. Thank you, Dana, for being vulnerable to all of us. And in case you're not familiar with number 9, played Ding Dong Ditch, that must be a Midwestern thing. That was something that we did as a kid. You go up and ring a doorbell, and then you run before the person gets to the front door, and then obviously you're gone when they get to the front door, and you laugh. So the things we do as kids, or internet or Xbox. So anyway, fun little exercise to kind of break the ice and get people laughing and thinking about, you know what, sometimes we aren't as clean as we think we are. We tend to mask our behavior. So the next page illustrates that from the assessment, people have a built-in application with Everything DISC. Everything DISC is a family of assessment tools to help you understand yourself, understand others, adapt your behavior to bring out your best in others in a relationship. And the page that you have in front of you shares what the DISC actually stands for. D stands for dominance, I stands for influence, S stands for steadiness, C stands for conscientiousness. And then in each of the quadrants on your worksheet, you'll see that there is a description of each style. What you'll notice about their behavior, what they are motivated by, what they tend to fear, what their limitations might be. And then in what looks like a sliced pie, you will see a combination of letters. So there might be a pure D, I, S, and C, but then there's also a variety of different combinations, D, I, S, I, S, C, or C, D. Now, if you can take a peek at the slide that I have on the screen, you'll see that there is a couple of initials on the illustration. Well, this is where the members of that particular team fell. So you can see that there is a scattering of teams members, and so they've got some diversity kind of clustered over on the left side, so they're probably more logic focused than accepting, and therefore that can promote a great discussion. As a result of that exercise, they're going to then go back to the team action planning and add to the next section on our people, where each team member identifies a strength, something they feel they do well or it comes natural, as well as what we call a stretch behavior to improve their effectiveness or contribution to the team. A stretch behavior is something that doesn't naturally come easy, but it could be something that others could benefit from, such as maybe that they are not very patient. So a stretch behavior could be practice patience. Quick quiz. The most successful teams have very little conflict. And number 2, the best teams are made up of people who are comfortable passionately arguing for their ideas. Again, if you would, use the chat box, type to all panelists and attendees your answer. You can put T for true and F for false. What do you think? Well, whether you said it or not, the answer to the first is false, that most successful teams have very little conflict. We're going to talk about what that means, what conflict means, and the second is true. So we got you all kind of thinking in terms of how people feel passionate about an idea but are willing to speak up. So what is this mastering conflict all about? On the next page, there is, again, an exercise that builds upon the DISC application in the center, and the outer circle talks about the unhealthy behavior during conflict. So, for instance, at the top, you'll see that those unhealthy behaviors for Ds and DI and IDs, they tend to say things that they will later regret. I am a DI/ID, that is my style, and I am guilty, as Dana will attest, to having, I call it vomit. I oftentimes will say things and then I have to clean it up afterwards. However, I need to learn more healthy behaviors during conflict, where addressing issues head on is important, and that's what my intention is, but sometimes my approach is not. So they learn about how their natural and unnatural style or productive style of conflict can be helpful to the team. To do so, there is an exercise that they have completed. A sampling of that is on your next page. where they identify what behaviors or actions are acceptable while engaging in conflict at work. And you'll see on my slide the data that's been collected for this particular team of 8. In your handout, for instance, you'll see, is raising your voice something that you feel is acceptable? Well, someone might feel like that means you're mad or angry, or it brings back childhood memories when their father or mother used to yell at them. So that's unacceptable. To others, it might be no big deal, because if you're excited about something, you might put more energy into your dialogue. And then as a result of that, you'll see on the far right-hand column, there are a number of team members who admit that they may do this themselves. So it's also a self-reflection. As a result of this module, they go back into the team action planning and they create our promise. Our promise is a list of 3 to 5 ground rules that the team agrees upon would be acceptable or unacceptable behaviors during conflict with your team, whether it be in meetings or whether it's in one-on-one discussions. And our team, Inspiring Solutions, has gone through this experience, and we have at the bottom of your handout, also on screen, created 6 promises to each other. And the one that I'm going to pull out is the one that I think we tend to use more often, number 4, work to find the third solution to accommodate all parties' interests. For instance, Dana might have an idea that's different than mine. We talk about them, we explain our justification or our rationale, and then we will work to find actually a third, better solution that takes into consideration what was important to our solutions. All right, as you could tell from even the length of this webinar, we've spent a good portion of our time on the first 2 behaviors. And that is true because we have to make sure that we have trust and have productive conflict before we move on to the third behavior, which is achieving commitment. On the next page, you'll see that when teams members are able to offer opinions and debate ideas, they will be more likely to commit to decisions. It's not necessary to achieve consensus, meaning you don't have to have 100% people agree. However, you must have the team's clarity and buy-in to commit, which means they must understand what's expected, and you might have a agree to disagree clause in your promise, and you have to make sure that you support the decision. It's not fair for any member of the team after a meeting to have a meeting that talks about what should have, could have been done differently. It's important to have open dialogue to get that clarity and overall sense of commitment. To help demonstrate this, there is a short commitment assessment that you could take to understand if you sometimes don't buy into the team's decisions for 5 different reasons. And the reason that that's important is a team that fails to commit oftentimes creates ambiguity among the team members about its direction and priorities. They oftentimes miss opportunities due to excess analysis and unnecessary delay. They breed a lack of confidence because they fear of failure. They tend to revisit and overanalyze discussions and remake decisions that were made previously. And they do tend to encourage second guessing among team members because if there's not a clear, definitive priority, people will just make up their own decisions. So as we move into the 4th accountability, on the next page, there is a wrong way of holding one another accountable. Several ways it would include not bringing it to the attention of others. It could be that they tend to talk to everyone else about what people aren't doing correctly rather than going to them. However, there are several ways that a team could benefit or embrace accountability. There's 10 listed there at the bottom of your worksheet. So one exercise is to go through and rank in order of importance, 1 being the most important or helpful, and 10 being the least helpful. And I would encourage you, to pick the top 3. What are those top 3 best strategies for your team? Maybe it is to be more direct. Don't beat around the bush. If you've got an idea or a concern, We can't act upon it or we can't consider it if we don't know about it. Another one might be to spend more time together. That's one of Dana and my challenges because I travel so much. We have to find quality time to communicate and understand priorities. One of the exercises that we teach in this module is that of giving people balanced feedback. I think people like to know when they're doing a good job. I also believe that we want to know when we're not doing something right. Avoiding the but bomb, this model helps you to say you're doing a good job here, but you're not doing a good job there. As you just heard, the but negated the compliment. Instead, use the word and, or transition more into a suggestion or asking a question, using phrases like, may I suggest, or I'd like to recommend, or perhaps you could. Then that sounds much more like a request than a demand. And then finally, again, at the end of this module, the team will go back to the action plan and create a list of 3 to 5 issues or priorities that their team needs to address or complete within the next 3 months so that everybody is on the same page and puts their energy towards the same focus. And then finally, the last or the 5th behavior of a cohesive team is that of achieving results. A team that focuses on results retains achievement-oriented employees. When we learn an organization that we're working with has a high sense of turnover, we oftentimes feel as though it's probably due to a lack of trust somewhere in the organization. It could be from senior leadership, it could be from middle management, but oftentimes there is dissension amongst the teams. They minimize individualistic behavior, which means if a team knows what they collectively are to accomplish, they'll work towards that common goal instead of working on their own. They celebrate and enjoy success, and they truly suffer their failure collectively. They don't place blame. They realize that we're all accountable. A good team that's focused on results benefits from individuals who can overcome their own goals for the good of the team, and they tend to avoid any kind of distraction that might be preventing them from working on what matters most. Things that might deter their focus. So the assignment for this is to create proof. And I always ask teams, what keeps your interest in watching a basketball game or a football game or hockey? It's the score, exactly. So one of the things that they're going to be asked to do is to put together some current goals, or maybe they have been given goals. And then what are some of the ways that they're going to be measuring their progress towards those goals? And then in what ways can they actually use a strategy to improve and achieve those goals? So once again, using the action plan, which there on the next page, you'll see the first 3 sections, the purpose, people, promise. And then on the next page is the one that we just talked about for our priorities. And then this last one, our proof, desired results for our success. So you can see that this is not just about training, it's really about a learning experience where a team explores their individual and team success and improves their potential. Like I mentioned early on, there is a follow-up, which is really neat because it is measurable. One of our Inspiring Solutions measurable goals is to improve our team's effectiveness. And so we will periodically check our team's effectiveness using a reassessment. Typically, we'll do it about 6 to 8 weeks after a team building session with the team, and tend to go back and revisit the action plan. In other words, did you do what you said you would do as it relates to your promises, as it relates to your priorities, and obviously how are you coming and achieving your desired results. If you're interested, the very next page in my slide gives you that quantifiable data. So as a result of the team's progress report, you can see here a comparison to the first and the second half of the team's development. Each of the 5 areas having a significant increase, going from low to medium and even to achieving the highest rating as a team's effectiveness. If you want more information, the last page gives you a program description that you could consider using for your C-suite or a leadership team. Maybe it's a department that you are on or that you lead. It could be a project team, but as we've stressed, it has to be with the actual team members themselves. The cost of the resources is $200 per person, and that includes both profiles, the front end and the back end, as well as one of the books, the book that Patrick Lencioni wrote, the Five Dysfunctions of a Team, to read as a pre-read. If you would like a sample of what a team report actually looks like, feel free to request that on the evaluation thereafter. And as always, we offer our participants a special. By attending today, you will receive a 25% discount off the resource. So if you commit by the end of February to schedule a retreat anytime during 2019, the per person cost is $150. So a great opportunity for your team. So in closing, we want to invite you and others to join us at our upcoming webinar next month, March 15th. We'll be on engaging today's employees. Your feedback does matter to us, so take some time, make some time after this webinar, fill out the survey, also indicating that if you have any ideas for future topics for the second half of the year, we want to meet your needs. So our team thanks you for joining us today. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to your involvement in future webinars. And thank you for allowing us to inspire your people with practical solutions for positive change.